How's it going, people? Welcome to United View and welcome back for the first time in a long time to a tactical view from UVHQ. In this video, we're going to be talking about the only summer signing Manchester United have made so far, and that is, of course, Matheus Cunha. But before that, I've been receiving literally 6 messages from people asking for my stance on Ruben Amorim. So the graphics geniuses here at UV have made a nice, helpful graphic to show where I stand with things at the moment. So, straight up in the pros and cons, if we start off with the cons, obviously, the record is absolutely abysmal. For a Manchester United manager, under any circumstances, even with all the mitigating factors in play, with the number of players that we don't want there, the turmoil at the top of the club, the financial issues, everything else, and obviously the end of the previous manager's reign as well, that is not good enough at all by any stretch. 14 out of 27 Premier League games that he's lost is an absolutely horrific record. So as much as I want to give managers time, and I do honestly want to believe that Amorim will turn things around, I can't hate on anyone for saying get rid of him, because that record just is not good enough. As bad as these players are, it's terrible. On the pros side, we are really scraping the barrel. So what we've come up with first is that he is arguably, and it is debatable, arguably the best looking manager in the league. Now, that's important because when the camera cuts to this, when we've conceded the 5th goal of the game for the 3rd game running, at least it's better than looking at Erik ten Hag. So there is that. And the second pro that we've come up with, again, really scrambling around for anything, is that Ruben Amorim is fairly honest in the way he goes about things. So his honesty in press conferences, he predicted the storm coming, and it was a hell of a storm, but really that is pretty much all we've got on the pros and cons list. So in terms of where I sit at the moment, just on this side of the fence in terms of keeping him and trusting him, but he's got a hell of a big job to do. The heart of my frustration with Ruben Amorim and the way he's setting things up at the moment is the goal kick. Now, we know from this is a fairly representative team, don't read too much into the players that we've got on board here. You have the centre-backs tending to split. The central centre-back then pushes on into midfield with one of the midfielders rotating in, and then that somehow ends up with a box being created with the other midfielder, one of the guys dropping in off the front line in there to sort of play in the half spaces either side. Now, the frustration that we've got with this is that if you put yourself in the shoes of Onana, De Ligt or Lenny Yoro, particularly De Ligt, as great of a defender as he is, the guy can't pass the ball forwards at the best of times, but if he's looking up and his option here is Harry Maguire or any centre-back really, in a tight space with someone pressing them, particularly if they're receiving back to goal in this situation, that's not a pass. As great of a defender as he is, the guy can't pass the ball forwards at the best of times, but if he's looking up and his option here is Harry Maguire or any centre-back really, in a tight space with someone pressing them, particularly if they're receiving back to goal in this situation, that's not a pass you want to play. If you look across on the other side here, Lenny Yoro, obviously, look, Aiden Heaven and Lisandro Martinez, fantastic line breakers, brilliant at passing the ball forwards. This works for them. But if you're playing a right-footed centre-back on that side, and the option is playing into midfield to Casemiro or Ugarte, who can't really be trusted to retain the ball under pressure at the best of times, again, you're not going to look for that option as a pass. You might try it, but then Ugarte loses the ball and the ball's in the back of your net. So that is pretty difficult, pretty awkward, because the centre-back's being asked to do something they can't do, receive on the half-turn and then try to play forward. And what that results in happening is these wing-backs have to come back and back and back. And that means then there's no width up at the top end of the pitch to really pin the opposition back line wider and deeper. So what you end up generally then seeing is the ball goes from one side all the way out to the other, all of these guys in the middle looking for an option to play forward, but you're struck with the wrong players in the wrong positions, and then these options into the pockets just aren't really on because the distances are a little bit too big, opposition wingers can sort of just tuck in, and then the ball ends up having to go round the side. So what ends up happening from United goal kicks is the back players aren't incisive enough to break lines, the players in the centre can't be trusted to receive the ball, and so the only option for United really is either to go around the block or to go over the block. Now, when United start to go over the block, you've got Rasmus Højlund there, who is utterly useless in any kind of aerial duel, any kind of physical battle, so that's just as good as giving the ball away. Likewise, if you're playing over and big into Alejandro Garnacho, again, he's not going to win a 1v1 situation, so the ball's probably coming back towards you, unless it sort of gets into a bit of space and the opposition fullbacks maybe pushed up on Dorgu. So really, going long isn't an option. So the only thing that's left for Amorim's Manchester United is having to play around and around and around. So it's around, side to side, side to side, side to side. And obviously by the time the ball gets out to the fullback, because these guys are so desperately trying to find a ball through the middle, the opposition can just slot back in. You've got a winger covering, you've got a central midfielder across, you've got a fullback in place there as well, and it makes it really difficult for United to combine and get up the pitch. And it crucially means the speed of play through the thirds is so unbelievably slow that everything becomes painful. It puts you to sleep, it's passive, and by the time you get the ball into the final third, there's 11 players back, which makes it very, very difficult to actually get shots off, create chances and score goals, which was United's biggest problem over the last season. So United's biggest problem by far is playing through, and Matheus Cunha is going to change that. However, before that, there's the one tactical tweak we need to see from Ruben Amorim. So bringing the fullbacks deep, as we've said, is killing United because we can't pin the opposition backline back, and that allows them to just step up the pitch and press in midfield very, very easily, knowing that United don't have an out ball because our players up the top end can't really compete in those situations for long balls. So the tweak we need to be seeing is firstly, get De Ligt off the pitch. He shouldn't be playing right centre-back. We need Mazraoui in here out of anyone probably. On the left side, need somebody natural there, whether it's Heaven or Lisandro Martinez. But crucially, this centre-back in midfield thing has to stop. Get the centre-back alongside Onana, create the back four with the right centre-back and the left centre-back, and the goalkeeper alongside whoever's playing the central one. That will allow then the wing-backs to push on a lot higher. And what that means is then opposition wingers have to drop off and there's a much bigger space for the midfielders to cover. Crucially then, from a Manchester United point of view, it means you've got two actual midfield players playing in this area. Now, if a midfielder isn't signed that can do the defensive side of the game and receive on the half-turn to sort of play forward, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Bruno Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo being tried out as a pivot at some point. On paper, it's very attacking, yes, but if United keep the ball much better by having better technical players on the pitch, there should be fewer transitions to defend, and so it shouldn't matter as much. Also really important that the players have come back looking in much better shape, much more lean, should be much more able and capable of covering ground, so hopefully that can sort of work. Other options, obviously Mason Mount could potentially go in there. But the key point here is Matheus Cunha and how he allows Manchester United to play through. So for the first time in a long time, this is a situation where Manchester United might be ahead of the curve in terms of a big signing. And the reason for that is that teams are moving more and more towards going man-to-man in the defensive phase, particularly from opposition goal kicks. So what we might see in this situation, for example, is the opposition stepping on a little bit like this. Let's say the fullback jumps with Dorgu if that ball goes out to that side. But then what you end up with here is these 1v1 situations. So Garnacho in this instance, Højlund in here, and Ahmad in there, potentially 1v1 against individual defenders. Now, obviously, Højlund back to goal has given the ball away so many times. That's the frustration we've all got. We know it doesn't work. Garnacho struggles in these inside spaces against a big centre-back because once you initiate that contact, he doesn't really have the strength yet to get out of it. This is where Cunha is going to be so brilliant for Manchester United, is that in these situations, Cunha is brilliant 1v1. He's physical. He's really capable of dealing with contact. In fact, in the duel, it's one of his best attributes. And he's able to hold up that ball when this happens and bring others into play. Now, the key part of this is that when opposition teams are 1v1, if you're able to keep that ball 1v1, all of a sudden, Mainoo can make a run beyond, Dorgu can make a run beyond. And this is the sort of thing that we've seen at Wolves with Cunha, where he holds up the ball and Aït-Nouri gets beyond him. And that combination play has worked wonders for Wolves and is a big factor in Aït-Nouri signing for Manchester City. So expect to see a lot of link-up between Cunha and Dorgu on that left wing. But also expect to see Bruno Fernandes and or Kobbie Mainoo starting to make runs beyond, because finally United have somebody in that front unit that can hold the ball. But even better than that, Cunha is not just able to play 1v1 back to goal, he's also really adept at dropping into spaces in here to link the play. So where we said earlier that sometimes if the player's up here, the distance is a bit too big for a ground pass, Cunha, if Mainoo can cleverly bring his man away, Cunha can get into that space there and pick up the ball. But he's brilliant getting on the half turn, going forwards and carrying that ball up the pitch. He's the type of player that will drag the game, drag United up the pitch, get that ball forwards, but crucially, because he's doing it in these central areas rather than out wide, opposition teams are getting sliced open rather than simply being played around and able to just shuffle back into shape. So, in terms of carrying the ball up the pitch, Matheus Cunha is absolutely brilliant. If we look at the stats here, what we can see is that compared to the other Premier League players, Matheus Cunha here with 3.3 carries into the final third per 90. Only Doku, out of all the Premier League players with a decent number of minutes played, only Doku is actually better than Cunha at this. He's on the same level as Ødegaard, a little bit better than Kovacic, Iwobi, and United's top there is Alejandro Garnacho. But the big difference here between Garnacho and Cunha is that Garnacho is often doing it from the widest channels, sort of driving infield, whereas Cunha is doing it from central areas already. And once you're already in the central areas, you're attracting players on both sides, creating the space outside you for a dynamic overlapping run from the wing-back, and also attracting players to the point where you can have a little slip pass into Højlund, or it's easier to combine with Bruno, Kobbie Mainoo, the other players that are in close proximity around the edge of the box, which is one of the areas United have struggled in. So with this particular attribute of Cunha, I expect him to be a massive factor in turning those goal kicks for United from a snooze fest, putting everybody to sleep, the ball just going round and round and round in a big U shape around the opposition block, into the type of guy that could turn that situation into effectively a transition. Get the ball into Cunha's feet, and all of a sudden United are flying because the opposition backline are high, we're able to attack space. So that's what's really exciting for me. Now, the next thing I think Cunha is brilliant at is when you start talking about shots and getting into the final third. So if we look at the shots per 90 stats here, this is Cunha with 3.8 per 90, and we compare that with some of the other Manchester United players from last season. Obviously Garnacho top on 3.4, so Cunha is slightly better than that. But the rest of United's attacking players in there, you can see how few shots they're taking each game. Now, if you can't get your best attacking players taking many shots per game, it's going to be very difficult for you to score goals. Obviously, you're not going to win many games. And if we sort of look at these numbers a bit more closely, you can see Xerxes and Højlund down there at 1.4 and 1.8. Ahmad and Bruno both around 2, or Bruno's a bit closer to 3. If we now compare this with some of the best players in the league on the next page, what we can see here is Saka, Palmer, Haaland and Salah all averaging over 3 shots per game. That is indicative of not just players that are sort of accepting of the responsibility, keen to take on the responsibility and keen to put the ball in the back of the net, but also teams that are set up better to bring more out of their attacking players. The more shots you can give your best players, obviously the more chance you're going to score more goals and the more chance you're going to win games. And Cunha, the fact that he's doing this in a very poor team, it's a really good sign that hopefully he can translate this into United. And that mentality that he's got, that ability to sniff out chances, go roaming for the ball, but the desperation to create something and turn it into a goal off every attack is something that United are missing. I've sat for, well, far too many hours over the last season in the Stretford end, waiting, needing a goal to come from somewhere, and there's just nowhere that you see you're going to get one from. But I think when you look at this man here, it gives you that little bit of hope that no matter what's gone on, he's got the chance to create something, whether it's out of the box, whether it's inside the box. He's got that little streak within him that he wants to be relentless. He wants to be the guy to make something happen. And that's so exciting. It's in line with these players. And that is hopefully something that can really elevate Manchester United. The final thing to sort of touch on with Cunha is accusations that he has been a bit lazy at times, and there was a stat going around about him having the most walking distance out of anybody in the Premier League. Honestly, I think that's absolute nonsense. I think the reason he's in the team as an attacking player is to win you games. And the way you win games isn't really about your jogging and your walking and that side of things, unless you're Berbatov. The way you win games is the peak intensity actions. It's your sprints, it's your duels, it's your bursts. That's the crucial bit that's going on. And Cunha is absolutely fantastic at that. And I think in even the defensive side of the game, he's so good in contact situations that actually he's pretty good at getting the ball off somebody in a 1v1 defensively. And he's very willing to go and press the ball and get there to be there at a reasonable time and try and nick the ball off his opposite number. So actually, I don't see any real problem with the application there. Now, there may be an argument that his positioning isn't the best, but really that's a fairly small thing and that can be developed very easily over time. For me, the biggest factor in determining Cunha's success, but also Ruben Amorim's success though, is the culture that's created within the squad. Now, when we're talking about tracking back, defending that side of the game, the thing that comes to mind for me is the clip from a Manchester derby a few years back where City were well ahead, easily going to win. But it was late in the game, United were on the break and they had every single player sprinting back at max pace to get back on top of that transition and make sure United couldn't even get a close sniff of scoring. That isn't about individual players and what they do or don't want to do. That comes from how the squad and how the club is set and how the culture works together. And that's the biggest thing that Amorim's got to get right. He stamped out a few players that weren't giving it everything in training. And obviously for me personally as a coach, I think the biggest and most concerning thing I've heard is that the training sessions weren't competitive. People were coasting. That has to go. If Amorim can get that right, every single player will hold each other to the right standard, to the point where being lazy, not pressing, not tracking back simply isn't tolerated. And once you've got that going, it doesn't matter if it's Cunha or anybody else that you can bring in, those signings will suddenly start to be a lot more successful because they simply have to meet those standards to get into the team. If they don't, the players won't have them in training. They'll be very quickly training with the reserves. So the biggest factor to determining whether or not this signing is successful, but also how next season goes, is how Amorim gets on top of this culture and make sure there's no bad apples, make sure the leaders are doing their job, and make sure that everything from top to bottom is lined up perfectly in the way he wants. Thank you very much for watching. This has been The Tactical View. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below. Plenty of exciting content coming up on UV from Tour. We've got fan views, we've got match views, everything from Flex and the gang over the next few weeks, so stay tuned.